Good evening to all. Warm welcome to you all to the Mysore Global Forum. It's an international panel discussion. Previously, we had discussions on various issues. The motto of international panel discussion is to create awareness and to discuss about the global issues which is happening surrounding us. With this, today we have a panel discussion on Indo-Nepal relations, the US latest activism in South Asia, how US is trying to interfere or to enter into the South Asia to contain the domination or interference of the other big powers. And as we know, Indo-Nepal having age-old relations. Since ancient period, we have a friendly and marital relations, cultural relations, and traditional relations. India is one of the good friend and immediate neighboring country. India, including Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, all are treating India as a big brother. Now, this is a time to India to show, to play in a elderly brother role, to helping these neighboring countries. That is the reason India is taking a strong decision, strong stand to follow the neutral policy. And also, India is giving a more priority to India's neighborhood first policy. It is enough to understand India-Nepal relations by completing the 7 projects out of 14 pending projects in a span of short period. It shows that India is giving a more priority to maintain the good relations with neighboring countries. Not only that, since ancient period, even moreover, in Indian freedom struggle, the Nepalis had a greater role in this movement. We should not forget that. And also, Nepal army, that is a burqa. India's relations with marital relations with Nepal, it is enough to understand how India is maintaining the balanced relations with neighboring countries. Not only that, India is an as old relations, as old friendly neighboring countries with Nepal. India fully respected the sovereignty of Nepal and wanted to see it becoming a prosperous. At the same time, it wanted to Nepalese political system should be made based, broad based, and responsible and responsive. The cooperation between the people of India and Nepal during the era of freedom struggle in India made it natural for the Indians to expect the establishment of a democratic system in Nepal. Even India also helped in framing the constitution in India. And as in a democratic country, as an elderly brother, India is always taking a side with Nepal, and India is trying to maintain good relations with Nepal. Now, today it is a time to discuss how to maintain the balanced relations with neighboring countries without having a hurdle, without disturbing the relations with other countries. And this is the reason today we organized the discussion on Indo-Nepal relations, the US latest activism in South Asia, what India is required to need, how to control the interference of the other big countries in Indo-Pacific or Indian Ocean region, along with South Asian region. Now, we have eminent scholars and scholarly people to have a more discussion to understand their views on US latest activism in South Asia. With this, I will invite all the eminent scholars to focus on Indo-Nepal relations and also US activism in South Asia. I request Brigadier Rajkumar N, who is giving a constant support to us, to deliver the opening remarks. I hope with this, our scholars will enlighten with more views, more knowledge from the eminent scholar. Sir, I request Brigadier Rajkumar Ed. Sir, please.
Thank you, ma'am. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, sir.
Good afternoon and Jai Hind to everyone present here. It is indeed an honor and privilege to be present among this august gathering of learned scholars and speakers. There is no age limit for learning, gathering knowledge, and thus I am present here. Today, we have a very relevant topic, as Dr. Bharti Hiraman had said, Indo-Nepal relations amidst the latest US activism in Southeast Asia. And to discuss this, we have some speakers, some learned speakers like Mr. Santosh Sharma Paudel, faculty at Department of IR, Tribhuvan University, Dr. Santosh Kumar Singh, Associate Professor at Department of Political Science, Central University of Haryana, Dr. Dhananjay Tripathi, Associate Professor and Chairperson, Department of IR, Faculty of Social Sciences, South Asian Universities. Besides the speakers, we also have Dr. Mansi Singh, Assistant Professor, Center for Security Studies, Central University of Gujarat, Dr. Nihar Ranjan Das, South Asian scholar, JNU, to share the views, and of course, our esteemed organizers, Dr. Bharti Hiraman and my friend, Dr. Binod. Before we start the discussion, I would like to just highlight a little bit of Indo-Pak relations. Indo-Nepal relations. India and Nepal share a very unique relationship of friendship and cooperation, characterized by open borders. I repeat, open borders and deep-rooted people-to-people contact of kinship and culture, which is not existing with any other neighboring countries. We have a long tradition of free movement of people across the borders. The Indo-Nepal Treaty of Peace and Friendship of 1950 forms the bedrock of special relations that exist between the two countries. India is also Nepal's largest trading partner. India has also provided transit facility to Nepal for third country trade. I mean, I say again, third trade country, which just speaks volumes about our relations. Traditionally, both the armies honor each other's chief by conferring them the honorary rank of general. Recently, the Chief of Army Staff for Indian Army was present there. We also have Nepali citizens being recruited in the Indian Army. Coincidentally, today, both the countries have a lady as a president. With this, I now request Dr. Binod to further carry on this discussion, and I'll pitch in wherever required, sir. Dr. Binod, sir.
Thank you very much, Chief. Thank you so much for setting the agenda for the talk today. I take this privilege of moderating this session on our neighbor political and foreign policy. But before that, I must thank all of my colleagues for gathering together and taking this topic very seriously. I had to spend a lot of time to convince everyone that this topic is really important for India and also for Nepal. It's a pity sometimes that we try to focus so much in IR on far away countries from us, like USA and even Japan sometime, but we try to neglect, which are, part and parcel of our security, the Nepal, It's very hard to put a line between India and Nepal. Where do we divide? I mean, politically and sovereignly, we are two countries, but, culturally, we are one country. So my esteemed colleague, scholar, and professor, and a lot of titles to Professor Santosh Sharma Paudel, he will disagree or agree with us, but I just feel that we are one community. Our thinkings match together, and it is pity for Indian scholarship that we don't have much focus on Nepal. I was trying to locate some good scholars for this forum today, and I can say that most of the people are focused on Indo-US and Quad and Indo-Pacific and 99% on China, by the way. So they were studying on China. So it's a privilege to introduce one of the most famous scholars from Nepal, who, like me or better than me, because I chose to study in China on Chinese RMB scholarship. But Santosh has studied in Japan, Singapore, both are known for their top-class PhD degrees in the world. It's very easy to get a degree in China and sometimes other countries. But getting a PhD degree, I was told, is very tough in Singapore and in Japan. So I really respect my colleague from Nepal. He is a scholar in all sense. And sir, he has been awarded Vidya Bhushan, we call in Sanskrit. I don't know the Nepali word. So he is decorated one. He is very young, and he is on the advisory board of Ministry of Foreign Affairs Institute, also in the Army Institute of think tanks. It's a loss for us that we are not inviting him to India. I think we should invite Santosh to India and have an offline discussion with him in our classroom. So, Mr. Santosh, are you hearing me?
Yes.
Great. Thank you so much. So I had a very brief introduction of yours, but basically we want to know your perspective on how Nepal suddenly has come on the international stage, taking its own foreign policy in its own hand. It's the first time I see that there are enough scholars in Nepal, there are enough think tanks in Nepal, and there are IR scholars like you in Nepal. So, I mean, 5 years back, I used to look, whom we can invite to talk on some forums. So this is a great development in Nepal. I would like you personally, how come you got interested to study IR studies? And right now, what is the role Ministry of Foreign Affairs in your country is playing in deciding the great power relationship with America, with China, with India? It's a very complicated and very fragile situation for all of you in your country. So being your Indian colleague, I mean, the platform is over for another 10 to 15 minutes, sir. I had sent you some questions. I'm not going to repeat here because of time constraint. But all of my Indian colleagues and also audience overseas online here, we're very eager to know that how Nepal is able to come with independent foreign policy vis-a-vis China, America, especially because of Ukraine and Russia crisis. Our media did miss some part of what's happening in Nepal, the protests against SPP, visit of US Secretary, US Pacific Command, Charles Flynn, and also the Tibetan Affairs advisor, something, right? Madam Uzra, right?
Yeah.
These things are so sensitive for Nepal and for India and China that anybody touching these red lines will really have some intention to, start the fire in our diplomacy. So would you like to start from here and then also reflect on what's going on in Nepal vis-a-vis the new thinking towards India, towards China, towards America? The platform is yours, Mr. Santosh. We are very eager to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pinot. I think that's a really good introduction to Indian Nepal relations. I think I can skip some of my introductory part with that introduction by Dr. Bharati and Brigadier Nivia. I think Dr. Bharati was spot on to say that our relations, as did Brigadier Nivia, that it goes millennia old, and in every aspect, not just in political, economic, cultural, and whatnot. And I think India has been the elder brother. I think the aspiration on the part of Nepalese is that we would be more equal. I think that's the aspiration. I'm not sure if the practical realities hold that kind of relations true soon, but I think it's there. And just I think coming to Dr. Kumar, I think I have only been studying about Nepalese foreign policy for the last 3-4 years. I think so. That's where the main pieces come from. And my experience and my arguments that I'll present today is based on that. I think before that, I had mostly focused on China, which is of help, but not necessarily aligned with what we are talking today. Now, I think one more point I'd like to add before I get into the topic is I think I'll speak more of an individual. So when you hear me, don't assume that this is what all the Nepalese people think like or argue in that particular. Some of the opinions could be more common in Nepal. Some of the arguments could be more common, but some of the arguments I'm going to make are not that common. And probably you'll realize that as we go forward. Now, I had received 5 questions, and I think I'll attempt to answer most of them because they were interrelated questions, but probably I'll just reverse the order. I'll start talking from the larger point and then get into the domestic politics that we have here. Now, The topic today is Indo-Nepal relations amidst latest US activism in South Asia, very pertinent one. And I'd like to mean that in this particular context, South Asia, to mean more on India and the countries, smaller countries around India, minus the off-part, because the whole relations and then discussion would be different if we include off-part in this particular discussion. Right? Because then the US engagement would not be new, and the kind of issues that they have is a little bit different experience than smaller countries in the rest of South Asia, like Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, face vis-a-vis India. So let me start with the fifth question. In the larger context, being Indian and American context. Now, Indian and American interests, not just in the region, but globally, seem to be converging more, especially in recent decades. Now, in addition to the huge and influential Indian diaspora in the US, common interest to maintain free and Indo-Pacific, the political culture of democracy in both the countries, and China being the common security concern for both the countries, though not necessarily for identical reasons. Now, during the Cold War, India and the US were not exactly on the same page, and neither was South Asia on the US priority. Therefore, the engagement that we use the term new in today's panel makes complete sense. Now, the US is a global power and India the aspirant, but the latter has always been a regional hegemon in South Asia. Given India's historical record, role in South Asia, it's the civilizational history and the future prospect, and also the intention to be a global power on its own, I doubt if India will be happy playing second fiddle to the US in the region or anywhere else for that matter. Even during the Cold War, the US had largely deferred the South Asian region to India, especially to manage the South Asian affairs. Now, Nepal's engagement with the US and China has increased in recent years. There are no two ways about that, is evidenced by increasing visits, the high-level visits that we have seen, the kind of grants that we are receiving, and the kind of interest that these countries are showing and engaging Nepal on. In Nepal, India and the US share a common concern. Strategic concern in limiting the influence of China is as common in some other South Asian countries. Yet a major point of difference is that India is not very willing to share the influence it has on Nepal. Traditionally, it has considered Nepal within its sphere of influence, and even though the cause may be same, the goals in this particular context may not be the same for India and US. Now, second, I think, as already mentioned by Brigadier, the width and depth of Nepal-India relations is far extensive compared to any other relations that we have. Right? For instance, I think I don't need to repeat that again, but then I think the access to the port, which has already been talked about, open border, the roti beti rishta, as we call it, the cultural relations, to the extent that the Indians almost get an equal national treatment in Nepal and vice versa, right? Therefore, the relations is unique, and just the addition of US in this particular aspect, we have some influence, but not affect the other significant part of Nepal-India relations in any major ways. Getting to the other part of the question regarding the balance, which is very widely used term in Nepal, especially when it comes to India and China, Nepal's relations with India and China, it comes from about 250 years ago when P.N. Shah, the founder of modern Nepal, called Nepal a yam between two boulders and indicated that Nepal should have a balance in relations with the north and the south. That characterization had stuck for good and bad, and hence the narrative that Nepal needs a balanced relations has been prevalent in Nepal, not just among foreign policy elites, but also equally among the political leaders. Now, it is so deep-rooted. Now we need to talk about, now there are some in Nepal who are arguing that the balance is no longer between two powers, but between three powers, with the US added in the mix. Personally, I find that characterization faulty and bereft of reality, in the sense Nepal is geographically facing India. Religious cultural ties with India are at a different level. The open border, the previous regions that I mentioned before, millions of Nepalese working in India, millions of Indians working in Nepal. These are some of the factors which lends India a special place in Nepal's foreign policy priorities. In that sense, no other foreign relations of Nepal can be equated with the kind of relations we have with India. In that sense, the word balance itself is, I think, archaic. Now, in saying that, this is not to downplay Nepal's relations with China or the US as well. They are critical partners in their own right. China more so probably because they are the neighbors than the US, right? Now, just as an exercise, let's imagine a case where there is a major, let's say a crisis like the flood that is happening in Pakistan. Where do we think most of the Nepalese will move to, seeking a safer place, if they had to move away from Nepal in that particular case? The answer is overwhelmingly India, even from that perspective. The relations is not very comparable. And that is the basic reality of Nepal's foreign policy priorities. And I think that should be reflected in the debate that we have in Nepal today. Now, I do not see this narrative being debated or even accepted in Nepal very soon. I think even our foreign policy 2077 that came 3 years ago has stated Nepal would like to have a balanced relationship. No wrong with that. But still, I think this needs to be first academically debated on the merits of having a balanced relationship in that particular case. Now, as for principle, Nepal maintains a non-aligned principle, as does India for that matter, and commits that it would not allow foreign powers to use Nepali territory against the interests of neighbors, particularly in this context, either China or India. A not so minor problem in this particular principle, which the principle itself, which is good, but then there is no common consensus of what legitimate interests of neighbors are in Nepal. So what concerns the legitimate interests that Nepal should protect and be concerned about? Now, it makes Nepal leaders more amenable to pressures and influence from external powers. Therefore, in this particular context, given the principle and external pressures, the groupings, international groupings, which are designed to or even perceived to limit the Chinese presence or power, Nepal is unlikely to join those or be actively engaged with those. Now, two factors are at play here. The first, the principles of non-alignment, and second, the external pressure, obviously coming from the north. Now, hence, Nepal would probably like to maintain a distance from directly being part of Indo-Pacific. That's the question, engaging quite very actively. But then I think even military alliances and agreements are off limits, as we saw in the case of SPP, which was secretly signed. A big uproar about that, and Nepal had to rescind. There are a lot of problems with the way SPP was handled. If anybody is interested, we can discuss that. But for the time being, I think the debate itself shows the sensitivity that Nepal needs to show, especially to our neighbors. Now, in this particular context with SPP and also the MCC, the 500 million US grant, I think that was very toxically debated in Nepal towards the beginning of this year. Finally, Nepal ratified the agreement, but then the debate was very toxic and non-nationalist. Now, I think domestic politics is also at play for some, and for a lot of Nepalese. Ideologically, they seem to be to the left of the center. And probably this is the training because we have a strong communist presence since before. I think we can again argue if they have still retained any communist characters, but then I think that has had an influence since the Cold War. And they have a natural suspicion to the engagement of US and China. Now, the evidence for that is the kind of toxic debate we had regarding MCC, which was an American grant, but then I think a similar agreement around the same time with China on BRI, it was almost unanimously given a pass, right? And especially our relations or engagement with US and India are used from a very nationalist point of view. I think to a certain extent, to be a nationalist in Nepal, you have to be anti-Indian, or at least that's the perception, that's how it goes. And I think this has been analyzed by Ranjit Ray in his book. And I think that it very accurately explains what Nepal's thought process is like in that particular context. As for the domestic division and fragmentation, there are two aspects to that. To start with the negative one, there seems to be, again, like I said before, no minimum consensus on specific policy issues or strategies. And there has been very little policy continuity. Nepal has acted ad hoc based on external pressure in a lot of extent. And because they are fragmented, it's easier for external powers to influence the decisions in Nepal. At the same time, the division between the factions and parties is less on foreign policy and more about domestic power politics in a weird way, because none of the factions are dominant in Nepal. I think Nepal has not taken extreme disruptive decisions and has reverted to the mean in most of the cases in foreign policy. Second, there is also a larger consensus on principles, even among the factions, such as the need to engage both India and China to remain non-aligned, right? This has brought together, at least led us, this has led us not to affect Nepal's relations with India, Nepal's relations with China, or even Nepal's relations with the US in any major ways. In that sense, the domestic decision has not been as bad as it has been, as bad in foreign policy as it has been for Nepal's internal development. Now, with this, I'd like to stop here. I'm sure I have glossed over quite a lot of things when I'm talking about this, and I think would like to answer if any questions you have during the Q&A. Thank you.
Dr. Vinod, your mic. Vinod, sir, mic is.
Thank you, Mr. Paudel, for taking us into in depth of Indo-Nepalese, Indo-Chinese, Nepalese, Chinese, and US relations. Still, if I can take one more minute from you and wanted you to reflect, what could be the exact intention? I mean, I'm asking very vague question, not diplomatically. As per your perception, like, or as a Nepalese, like, what do you think America wants to promote in Nepal by little bit, as you wrote in Diplomat, that there is a pressure on Nepal, some kind of pressure to go ahead with the SPP.
Right.
So I just wanted to know, basically, Americans have a dream of, reflecting their democracy project around the world. Even they comment on India, that Indian democracy is not a real democracy. So since Nepal is in transition from a different revolutionary period to a republican period, do you think that what they're saying is what they mean, basically training you for disaster management? Because in 2015, when earthquake hit Nepal, I think India and China were the most important country to help out, right, sir? If I'm not wrong, you can correct me.
Right.
So can you just take 1 minute to reflect on the agenda of SPP? That is one of the background of this discussion today, that we should not misunderstood Americans, what they want to do in this small Himalayan country. Santosh, sir.
Okay. I think I'd like to bit on the MCC, the kind of very light thread that the Americans, or the pressure that Americans put on Nepal by saying they would have to review Nepal-US relations if Nepal failed to ratify the MCC. I think that is the sort of language that the US has not previously used for the most part. Now, coming back to SPP, I think disaster management definitely is an issue that Nepal needs to improve upon. There are quite a lot of development issues. For example, the flooding being an annual trend, that is a critical concern. The earthquake, it is in the fault lines, therefore very prone to earthquake. In that sense, I think, technically speaking, we need capacity development in those areas. There is no doubt about that. However, I think there are a couple of aspects, especially, let me first talk on the Nepalese side, how it was handled in the wrong way. Firstly, the agreement was carried out by military. Nepalese military is not how normally international agreements have on affairs, which gives credit and raises suspicions about what the actual intentions are, both from Nepalese side and also from the US side, if the Ministry of Foreign Affairs itself is left out from the discussion. Second part, that was never publicly debated. Now again, there may be no ill intention there, but then I think if something is shrouded in secrecy, people are bound to suspect that there is a sinister motive behind whatever agreements we have. Now, with regards to US, again, the SPP itself, it is an agreement between the US National Guard, which is not the military per se of the US, but definitely security force, right, with the Nepalese military. Therefore, the suspicion, at least the perception in Nepal, was that US was trying to enter Nepal under two pretexts. One, because now there will be certain infrastructural projects that will be built for the MCC, and then they could stay there to say they needed to secure those places from whatever threats they could face, those projects could face. And second part, many Nepalese felt that that could lead the US army that could be the entry point for the US Army to stay in Nepal. Now, it won't be the first time if US Army was engaged here in Nepal. I think we all remember the Kampa Rebellion, I think to the north in the 60s and early 70s, whereby I think the US helped the rebellion in Tibet through Nepalese territory. So that concern is still fresh in Nepalese mind. I think that is why I think there was a large pressure on the political parties, especially the government, to rescind from that particular agreement. And finally, the Nepalese government decided to do so in writing. And at the same time, I think the pressure from Chinese, who were already displeased with Nepal ratifying the MCC, was intense. At least with MCC, it was not a military agreement or security agreement in any shape or form. But with SPP, that was in the gray zone, in the sense that it was not the security force, but as in the military, but then it was a security force. Therefore, I think the pressure was even large in that particular context. I think you're on mute again.
Sorry, I'm just trying to avoid some unnecessary sound here. It's very frank and candid perspective from an Nepalese scholar point of view. But in India, we think, is it somehow Americans are interested in having some Gorkha soldiers for their own military campaigns outside in any other part of the world? This last point.
But I'm not sure if they're interested, but I wouldn't be surprised if they would be interested, given the voluntary, given the image that Gorkha soldiers have, given the way they have served for Nepal, for India, for the British, and for certain other countries in Singapore, in Brunei, and so forth. But I doubt if Nepal, there will be any such agreement coming soon, because I think Nepal, again, like I said before, the suspicion for the US activity is pretty high. There is a very nationalist undertone with our engagement with the US, and with the larger number of communities being, if not the dominant force, but a very influential force in the power. I don't see that coming. But then, in terms of interest alone, if they're interested, then probably there is a reason why they're interested. But I don't see that being implemented.
All right. Before, I think I have taken too much advantage of my moderator position. I'll ask my colleagues, Professor Bharti, Madam, would you have any point to engage Mr. Santosh Paudel, or should I move on to the next speaker? Ma'am Bharti.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Dr. Binod. And thank you, Mr. Santosh, for your views on Indo-Nepal relations. And you have given a very lengthy vision on Indo-Nepal relations. Sir, my concern is, as India is emerging as a major power in Indo-Pacific or Indian Ocean region or South Asian region. Okay, and now since, as I told you in the beginning, since ancient period, Indo-Nepal having good relations, that is especially traditional relations and cultural relations. My question is, now how Nepal is treating India? What Nepal is expecting from India? Whether it wants to India be neutral, because India already has taken a strong stand towards the neutrality, because India is firmly believing in neutral principles. Then, in case if Nepal is expecting India to interfere in this matter, then what will be the future of Indo-Nepal relations? Because already we have experienced, there were so many anti-Indian movements in Nepal. With this concern, with this context, I wanted to know from Nepal, how do you feel, and how do you expect? What are you expecting from India? How are you thinking? How are you looking India and India's stand towards the neutrality?
Okay, ma'am.
Okay, I think I was not very clear what Dr. Bharti was referring to when she said about neutrality with regards to what. But I think before that, I think I'd just like to answer a couple of things. I think increased Indian presence around the globe. I think it has become the third largest economy. In a way, I think in Nepal, we are looking at it very fondly for a couple of reasons. Firstly, I think there used to be something called the Hindu rate of growth that no longer applies. And I think that's a very serious image makeover, not just for India, but other countries in South Asia, which was Hindu rate of growth supposed to be 2-3%, even when we were developing from a very low base. Now, I think that with the current rise of India and its economic growth, that narrative is no longer heard. And I think that's a very positive step for all of South Asia. Second part, I think we're also seeing a very confident India in international stage. I think if we look at some of the speeches that there's almost every speech that Singh has made, that is the face of a very confident country coming from a very confident region of the world. I think the way, purposely, I think the Chinese had started giving back since the last few years. I think Singh had started doing the same, and in much more intellectually engaging ways. So I think this is a very interesting time. And looking at that, I think because for the rest of the world, South Asia often is seen through Indian eyes, that is also a good image makeover for the whole region. Right? Let me just state that. So I'm very happy to see Singh giving back. I think finally, and having the the courage to have a different perspective, to have a own perspective on the again. I think the Indian rise. I think we have a lot of issues between India and Nepal to deal with. I think Opera is one of the issues. Unique, but then again, that creates its own problems. Okay, I think Dr. Vinod is looking for what, so I think I'll just stop here and then
please,
I'll come back later. Yeah,
I think most of my colleagues will have questions with you, but we also want to have some Indian points on how do we see South Asia and with other groups. So it's an honor to me to invite one of my senior, who is right now heading as the chairperson of IR department of none other than South Asian University. So the having South Asian University itself is a great innovation to improve understanding and dialogue between our countries. And India has taken a great step in this direction. I think we have a branches in Nepal also of this university, right? So Dhananjay sir, are you getting my sound? I can't see you. Professor Dhananjay Tripathi, yes.
Yes, I'm getting it.
Sir, I'm very fond of your brief articles in Indian media. I would like you to have similar speech here in very brief, like 1,000 words. If you can just tell us, most of my colleagues, they know you. I'm not going to introduce you because you are heading the department right now. And for the coming 1 week, you have lined up conferences on Afghanistan, which is very critical, and different countries. I think Nepal is one of the, do you think Nepal is the easier issue for India compared to Afghanistan, Pakistan, Sri Lanka we have been dealing for last 100 years? Do you think when it comes to Nepal, you can sleep well in the night, you don't have to worry much? Why? What is the great thing between India and Nepal? Especially, sir, when America is trying to get into Nepal so deeply, some people are saying that even they want American boots in Nepal. What is your understanding, sir? Do you think India is directly interfering in Nepal, or India is just watching from it? Let Nepal decide whether it wants to go close with America or with India. Sir, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Vinod. Thank you, Vinod. Thank you to the BRICS Institute for giving me this opportunity to be with this panel, with their distinguished panel today, and discussing a very important issue. And I completely agree with Vinod that we keep discussing about the rest of the world, but unfortunately, we forget our own neighborhoods. We forget about South Asia, the region where we live in. The other very interesting point is that whatever happens in a neighborhood, it will have immediate impact on countries, those who share borders. So if something happens in Sri Lanka, India cannot take a position that it will not going to affect us. If something happens, and I'm glad Santosh said that if there's a flood in Nepal, which country people expect to go. So I think that explains not only about India, Nepal, but about the whole of South Asia, that we are so interlinked. And similarly means, and let me talk today a little bit, my apologies, Santosh, but let me talk today a little bit from an Indian perspective. And let me begin with this, that a peaceful, stable, prosperous South Asia is in the interest of India. As I said, that we share borders, and anything goes wrong in any of the countries is not good for India. Number two, India will definitely like external forces to be out of the region, not intervening in different ways that we have seen in past. There had not been a very good experience with such kind of interventions. We have seen Afghanistan, the kind of intervention during the Cold War and post-Cold War. And there are many other issues. So India is rightly not very comfortable with big powers intervening in the neighborhood, and particularly in the strategic issues, because as I said, that it's a matter of concern. Anything happens in the neighborhood also going to affect India. India cannot say no to that, means because of the sharing of the borders and many other things. So that one. What about India-Nepal relation? I think there are different phases and different ways to analyze it. India-Nepal relation can't be defined in one term. It is about state to state, Kathmandu, Delhi, but it is about Roti Beti Sambandh also. And what makes India-Nepal relation quite unique, and sometimes I say, a couple of my students are joining this, I can see them here, and I keep repeating in my class that India-Nepal relation is quite unique, not only from the state perspective, Kathmandu, Delhi, but because of the people's perspective. And it's not going to change, means there will be phases of, what Santosh says, that being anti-India is like more nationalist in Nepal. These will be the phases. These will be the phases. I can also tell that there was a moment some 10 years back. I was in JNU, and all that at that point of time, there was a war going on in Nepal. And I'm referring to the Maoist phase. And there was a government of Atal Bihari Vajpayee. And the government has played a very vital role in bringing back all the Maoists and suggesting that Nepal should go for a democracy, and not taking the side of monarchy at that point of time. There was a huge reception for India at that particular point of time from the same Maoists. Some of them were in India. They have addressed the press for the very first time when they came from underground. I remember I attended one such meetings. So it's not, then that was also a phase. And I'm telling you the phase is just some 10, 12 years back. I'm not referring to 60, 70 years back history, 10 years back. Now, something happened with the constitution and other things, and of course, the Madhesh issue, etc., etc. So then there's a little bit of concern. But look at the trajectory right now. And I sometimes what we happens in South Asia, we look at Hans Morgenthau, we look at Kenneth, Walls, etc. But we forget that there are Kautilya and there is Prithvinarayan Shah's Updesha. So if one has to understand the Nepal's foreign policy, they really have to look at that. And in Updesha, there's an excellent analysis of how Nepal should be working in terms of, because there are two big neighbors. One is on one hand side is China and one hand side is India. Now, how Nepal is going to formulate its policy? And let me tell you, Nepal's foreign policy is fascinating. From a IR perspective, from a small state perspective, Nepal remained independent when rest of the South Asia was colonized. And there was a little bit of that foreign policy, the reflection of that foreign policy. What we have seen that over the years within the Nepal political elites, there has been this talk about balancing between India and China. I always strongly felt that this is not a very correct position to take. You know why? And here I bring now from Indian perspective, I'm bringing the South Asian perspective. This is not a very correct position to take, because India-China relationship has number of complex issues in it. The moment a country says that we are in between the two, the entire complexities also spill over to that country, right? And India-China relation has, as I said, that there are a number of layers we can discuss at some point of a time. It's not so easy to discuss in 2 or 3 minutes. So now everything comes there as well. Second thing, this entire story of China, BRI, etc., the fascinating story, the entire South Asia was fascinated at one point of time with that. Now the critical issues are coming up with that. We have seen none other than in Pakistan, people are raising concerns about the utility of BRI. We have seen the case of Sri Lanka, the Chinese debt has become a question. And if not, then at least the question of what to do with this such mega project, what it has added in terms of economies of a small kind like Sri Lanka. So that kind of thing is going on in South Asia, it will remain. But what I feel that even if that is the case in Nepal, the Nepal-India relationship is not going to be very out of the track. So these are the phases in India-Nepal relation. As I said, 10 years back, there was a different kind of phase. Now there's a different kind of phase. And I can see, and I'm sure Santosh will agree that right now there is a recalibration. A process is changing between India and Nepal relation. Something is moving in a positive direction now. For whatever reason, there are several reasons. It's also BRI, the China question, and many other things. But there is a positive issue that is there. On the last point, because you said that I have to finish in 10 minutes, on touching on the US relation, I think every South Asian has to really think on the US role in South Asia. Because we keep talking about Chinese role, sometime we should talk about the US role. A number of issues from terrorism, starting from terrorism to other issues as well. US role remained critical in the region. The Cold War times, the entire issue of terrorism, one cannot analyze, if objectively analyzing the history of terrorism in South Asia, we cannot looking into the role of US and that. So US has its own interests in different countries, different regions. Right now, they have an interest in containing China a lot. Sometimes that perspective is like, and we can see that this competition between the US and China is going to grow. It is not going to stop. The Taiwan is a recent example. So this is going to grow. Now the world is heading towards that, and South Asia cannot remain aloof to this kind of competition, precisely because South Asia has relations both with China and with US. Now, in that terms, I think one of the points and where there's a need for rethinking regionalism in South Asia is that we still stand divided. I think there is no South Asian vision as how to deal with this emerging condition. I really appreciate the role of the Indian government right now for looking into the South Asia from a new energy, whether it is Maldives, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bangladesh. There's a lot of effort from New Delhi, and this is required in a sustained manner. India should not derail. This is required in a sustained manner. India should remain focused on South Asia because the world politics is changing. So this kind of a strategic competition that Dr. Vinod has organizing this panel is going to continue. It's not going to stop. This will continue. There is, if SPP is rejected, I'm sure Santosh US strategic in some other way is going to come to Nepal and to different other countries, because the China-US competition is a reality. Now, what do we need? We need a very regional vision as how to deal with it, because South Asia has to deal with it. As I said, that we have relation with both, with China, with US. Now, India has its own way of understanding this. We have a trade relation with China, but China is also creating trouble for the Indian borders. That there is where the Indian complexity comes. But other countries have their own kind of complexities. Look at Pakistan. Pakistan is now trying to be tilt towards a little bit more towards the West. From China to West, Pakistan is now trying to recalibrate its position. The same with many other countries. So I think at this juncture, a kind of a South Asian understanding on this is very important. And my apologies to say that India has to play that role. Means I may appear as something very Indian, but I keep saying that if we think of South Asia, India is critical in South Asia because of technical and many other reasons, the demography, the geography, the economy, the strategic depth. So, and for India also, it is equally important that they should have a credible, influence or credible acceptance in whole of the South Asia. So let's stop here. Thank you very much. You're on mute.
I'll have to just repeat one line what Professor Dhananjay said very emphatically, that the contest of the century is between China and United States, and the South Asian countries could be a pawn in the US game plan. So this is very clear to any student of international relations. And if we don't choose our next move carefully, I think we're going into another Cold War. So the institutions like South Asian University and your department, sir, do you think that you're able to play advisory role in advising government of Nepal and different countries that how to choose a better role for South Asia, where we don't antagonize anyone, but we choose our own foreign policy, especially, sir, when there are a lot of organizations like BRICS, SCO, BIMSTEC, SAARC. So you are studying so many organizations, but sir, in your perspective, which is the real organization which represents the interest of South Asia on the global platform, which we should focus?
See, one thing, and let me draw from one of the speeches of foreign minister, which he has recently delivered. He said very specifically that regionalism is our priority. Now, when he says regionalism is our priority, and he said that South Asia is also our priority, I can understand. It's not a rhetoric. India understands that the globe is changing, the international politics is changing, and in that, South Asia is very important for India. India cannot ignore it. Second, what kind of role we have? We can, as I said, that there is a need for a South Asian understanding of all these new changes, whether it's a Russia-Ukraine crisis. We need a South Asian understanding. It is affecting us. Our oil prices are going high. I mean, Sri Lanka has suffered because of what is happening in Russia-Ukraine. We are also paying the price of that. It's not so easy to say that it's happening in a different region. This rivalry, the US-China rivalry, will have different kind. It will take different shapes and forms in future. It will come to all of us in different forms and shapes, So yeah, of course, for India, it's important, but for the other regional countries, we need to have a South Asian perspective. Like for Afghanistan, there's an American perspective, right? There's an European perspective on Afghanistan. What is the South Asian perspective on Afghanistan? Because how do we look at it? That's also a very important question. And South Asian perspective, I have 1,000 differences with a Pakistani person from Pakistan, but I need to take into account if we are discussing Afghanistan. I need to take into account the question of Iran, the question of Central Asian republics. These are something very, very important. So we have to be very open, but what are our perspective on these issues? So I think there's a lack of this kind of forums. We need to interact with our colleagues from different regions. We need to be very open and come up with our own understanding on issues. That's very important for future of South Asia.
So I repeat that we have to have a South Asian perspective on global relationship, especially what's happening in South Asia. It should not be decided by United Nations always and some big powers. At the same time, Professor Dhananjay emphasized that there's a lack of academic community and bond between scholars of IR in South Asia. So I hope in future our forums can bring more scholars together to exchange our views in a very candid manner. the time asked me to move on to our very senior and very distinguished speaker, Dr. Kumar Singh, who is right now leading an institution called Central University of Haryana, a very young university in a very beautiful campus, which is designed just like JNU. And it becomes a little bit holiday for me sometime to visit him, And Professor Santis, can you hear me? Can you please? Dr. Kumar Singh. Can you unmute, please? Then, sir, we'll come back to you with the students' question and answer in the last, but I have to move to the last speaker today. Dr. Kumar Singh.
Yeah, Dr. Vinod, thank you. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir.
So happy to-
few words.
so-
Allow me to say a few words about you, sir, before I hand over to you.
Yeah.
I said that your campus is very beautiful. That means you have to invite us sometime. And second thing, the best compliment I can give you is that you are the Narendra Modi of Indian IR. Every day you are having a speech, every day. Even today, when we are having the conference, I got a message that he is occupied in another conference. So he will try to manage his time. So, sir, from your height, from your perspective, and the kind of conference you are attending every day in Delhi and in NCR and different part of the world. And at the same time, you are a kind of, you have spent good time in America and United Nations University in Malaysia. You have a lot of journals under you. You have students from South Asia doing PhD under you. So we are expert of China, and we find that it's the first time in South Asia, China and India are on the same page when it comes to the American policy of, pressurizing Nepal to sign SPP, MCC, and so many terms, they use. Basically, as Dhananjay sir said, they will not give up. They want a backdoor entry. They want to come and have influence on Nepal the way they have on other countries. So Santis sir, I know you are expert on healthcare, your climate change, and security. These all are part of security, and it concerns South Asia very much. But America comes to South Asia for helping us in humanitarian terms, in disaster relief, blah, blah, blah. But, the purpose is something else. So could you please combine both with your perspective? You have 10 minutes, sir. Please guide us.
Thank you, Vinodji. First of all, I would like to thank basically BRICS Institute and University of Mysore for inviting me to participate in this talk. And definitely, I congratulate to all of you for initiating such thing, which is going to help us in having better understanding of the topic and the areas which are happening around us actually. In terms of international relations and politics, definitely that is what very much associated with students only of political science and all these. But the reality is beyond that. It should be known each one of us, whether we are a student of political science, whether a student of IR, foreign policy, that doesn't matter. Because whenever we pick a paper or magazine, we usually get on same page news of international politics. So we all are students of international politics, international affairs, and foreign policy and diplomacy. In somehow we all are knowing the basic principles, concepts, theories of IR. Not literally what I am talking about. Dhananjay sir mentioned like kindness walls, like Hans Margenthau might be you're not knowing, but things are very clear to all of us. What is national interest? What is national power? How a country can maximize its own interest? How diplomacy can be used? These kind of questions around us. So for that, I would like to thank you, Vinodji. And there's another thing I would like to say. I'm not Narendra Modi of IR. I have learned a lot. Definitely through different interactions and dialogues and deliberations and participating in different conferences too. Dhananjay sir has made a lot of good points in his presentation, but I'll pick the last point. I'll start from that point because that is important. Here we have to understand all the countries are, as per political theory, all the countries are free, independent, and sovereign. They have their own rights to make their own policies as per their own needs, requirements, and its interest. We can't force a country to go as per our rules or things. But the thing you have raised, the reality is beyond that. That is what we talk about. That is what are being written in books. But what is in practice? That's truth. We have to understand. When we talk about Nepal, what Nepal does and what Nepal can do, that is what we have to look into basically. And the theme question comes with US, China, India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, all the countries having the same kind of thing. You can't say this is duty or this is moral obligation of India because India is one of the biggest and largest country, or militarily it is strong and economically strong. It's a duty of India. That is what we know. I don't think that is good assessment. Have you ever seen US doing something good, something free of cost for those countries which are underdeveloped? Whenever you talk, we talk about Nepal, Bhutan, Maldives, or any other African countries, Asian countries, which are smaller countries, underdeveloped, least developed countries, what we see, all the policies, whatever US or China is adopting or implementing, enforcing, basically they are doing for their own national interest or to maximize their own national interest. That includes every aspect, like security might be that kind of security, political or diplomatic or any strategic. But the thing is that the countries are doing for their own betterment. They are doing for their own national interest. But what Nepal needs to do, that is what the question is. Is Nepal in that position which can compromise with all the countries, including India, China, US, all the countries? Whenever we go to pick the cases from India, why India is having not so much good relationship in last few years with Nepal? That is the question. And why Nepal is going closer to China? What is the story? We have to look into the entire picture, the global picture in one go. India is going closer to basically a US. US is coming closer to India. We have to look the story from both sides. We can't say like India is going towards US. And US is not interested to have good relations with India. That is not true. Truth is that both of parties are agreed to go ahead with their good relationship. The same is China. China is also trying to influence those countries which are closer to India and also closer to US. For the example, Nepal has been influenced by China in last few years. Why and what are the reasons? We all are knowing very well. And that is what the right of Nepal. I'm not going against that. Whatever Nepal is doing, that is absolutely fine. But thing is that, is it duty of India to have good relationship with neighboring countries? Should India go beyond after basically in Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Maldives, Pakistan, Nepal? What are the obligations? What are the duties of these smaller countries? They don't need to go have good relations with India too. That is the story. India have not shown its interest in these neighboring countries for several years, or many years, last past many years. We have 1950s, 60s, 70s, 80s. We have all the time tried to have good relations with neighboring countries. And last 6-7 years, we have seen distance from neighboring countries and we're going away. That is not good for India. I'm not talking that is good. That is not good at all. But thing is that we have to understand why India is doing so. India has tried its best to keep good relations with Bangladesh, Nepal, Maldives, Sri Lanka, Pakistan. But why it has been failed? We have to understand, because the reality is all the neighboring countries, and not only neighboring countries, global scenario is that that of the reality of the basically national interest, maximizing national interest and maximizing their own economic goals and their own strategic goals. So India is now more practical what it was earlier. That is the point. India is more realistic that it was earlier. That is what we have to understand. And that is what being followed by all the countries, including neighboring countries of India. Whether that is Nepal, so with the zone of peace, neutrality, non-alignment. They have talked a lot about that. Is it happening? Sometimes it get closer to China, sometimes get closer to India, sometimes get closer to US too. That is a story. That is what happening, and that is reality. I'm not against that. That is good for their own development. That is good for their own growth. But the reality is that we have to understand India's position too. Why India is not running after. I'm not denying this. This is what we have to do. We have to go after these countries if we want to grow. We want to have a stable democracy, stable economy, stable conflict-free zone. So in that case, we have to go to relationship with neighboring countries, whether that is Nepal or any other country. So we are trying. Modi government is trying its best to have good relations with Nepal. In last 6-7 years, it has approached several times of Nepalese governments to have discussion, deliberations, dialogues, so that we can minimize our differences on different issues, whether that is Kalapani, whether that is economic issue, whether that is border issue, whether that is water dispute. All kind of issues are there, and issues will remain always there. We can't say like we are going to have a best relation and we will never have any kind of differences. That would never going to happen. The reality is that we're going to have no differences all over, every time, always. So what is the base mechanism? We have to sit together. We have to understand both of the countries, and all the countries, including in South Asian region, have same rights, has same obligations, duties, and the same policies, outing same policies maximize their own interest. So in that context, we can't blame a particular country, we can't blame a particular nation for misconduct, for misdoings. So the reality is that, and the story I'm going, maybe you have already sent few of the questions to me. If I go through that questions, definitely I'll take those questions into 1 or 2 minutes. Okay. What are the priorities for India-US cooperation in South Asia? That was the first question you said to me. Definitely, this is very important. Why India-US is going closer? And why only Quad? This is not India have good relations with Quad. Yeah, India is part of Quad. Quad is having 4 nations, 4 different nations, and all the 4 nations have there in mind. China is there on mind. Whether that is Australia, that is US, Japan, whether India, all the countries have same country in mind, China, and that is rival, that is going to threaten their development. They're going to threaten security, their strategic policies. That's what they're doing. So how are we going to contain this China? That's what basically. This is not example. There's another important AUKUS, what called basically Australia, UK, and US collaboration. That is what happening. This Quad is not only example which are having. Why India is going after that? That's important point to note here. Nepal became part in 2017 of BRI, and that was not in favor of India. And India never wanted Nepal to do that, but in Nepal did. Why Nepal did that? Because it had to maximize interest. Why India can't join? In same manner, India also joined Quad. No, in same manner, Pakistan has joined BRI. In same manner, Sri Lanka is going to have good relations with China. So all countries are doing their own things to their own interest. So why not here? This is the practice I'm now, sometimes we become so emotional. India is no powerful country. India is economically so strong country. India is one of the biggest military in the world. So it's duty of India to go after these smaller countries. And yeah, I'm concluding this. And there's another point which we have to look into basically is terrorism. What is happening basically after withdrawal of US in Afghanistan? What is happening? Suddenly, Pakistan started going a good relationship with Afghanistan. It has started propagating to support Afghanistan. Earlier, it was not in favor of support of basically supporting to basically government of Afghanistan, but they have now started to support basically Afghanistan government, and that is what not like by basically US government. The US is not going to have good relations with Pakistan. I'm not going to support basically smaller countries which are neighboring, so-called neighboring countries of India. So in that context, US is going to have good relations with India. Why? Because it is going to achieve its own goals through India. India can be used, and that is what have done by US in the past too. But the reality is that whether India is going to allow US to misuse its on land, its on military or economic market. So we have to look into that.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. And risk the new world order would have in South Asia, like I have gone through that. Several risks are there. Rivalry between India and Pakistan, that is one intense issue between all the countries, among all the countries. I am talking about China is there, important player. China is going having good relationship with India. Oh, sorry, China's good relationship having with Pakistan, and all the time it will invoke basically Pakistan to go against India. So in that context, that is one of the important threats to this entire region. If you want to have a stable and basically this South Asian region, definitely we should have a peaceful region. Taliban regime, we have already discussed about them, and all the speakers have spoke about them. I'm going to read that. And Sri Lankan crisis, we have witnessed that. And not only Sri Lanka and Pakistan going to have such kind of economic crisis in the days to come. We have one of the biggest example. Yeah, I'm concluding in 30 seconds, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, 30 seconds. And what can be done to ensure the Indian interests are not compromised with the influence of new great powers in the region? in several things, like India should actively use its diplomatic skills to engage with the country. This is what all these speakers have spoke about. India should boost its foreign policy tools like neighborhood first policy. And this neighborhood first policy has been a concept which adopted by our current government too. I'm not telling this is what we coined by, but government has shown its interest going with this existing policy, neighborhood first policy. So why we are failed? These neighbor countries are also having a suspicious approach towards Indian policies. So they have also show their faith in basically Indian policies. That is what I'm liking in this. India should focus on improving and strengthening bilateral region. India should also try to improve its ties with the powers at a multi-level to secure national interest. That is what can be not told. But I'm not telling this only to TR. This is for all the countries in the region. This is the reality. And non-conventional issues like health, climate change, these are there. We'll discuss on those in next panel debate. Thank you. Thank you.
Dr. Santis Kumar Singh, thank you so much for the wide perspective of all the issues related with South Asia. I'm not the right person to comment on your speech, so I'm lucky to have Dr. Nihar Ranjan Das, a quite super senior of ours, who has been focusing on South Asia exclusively for the last 20 years. Nihar sir, can you hear me, please? Professor Nihar Ranjan Das.
Yes. Good evening. I would like to thank BRICS Institute and Mysore, University of Mysore, and particularly my friend Dr. Binod Singh for giving me the platform. And I am also very happy, and in fact the panelists like Dr. Santosh Sharma, Dr. Santis Singh, and Dhananjay Tripathi, they have actually made it very easy, or very what do you call it, discussed every aspect of the subject that we have taken up today. And as we know that Nepal and India, where to start and where to end, it's sky is the limit, as we say, because of the historic relations, and although there are some irritants that we have witnessed in the recent past, and but our friendship is so strong, and that is the that actually takes care of resolving issues in due course. And therefore, being a scholar of South Asian studies, in fact, I would just correct the organizers that the JNU is added to my name, although I am a PhD from JNU, but currently I am not associated with JNU. Therefore, that is the only thing that I wanted to correct you. Now let me just flag few issues, and we have discussed every aspect that have actually hogged the limelight in the Nepalese newspaper or the Nepalese media. Whether it's the MCC or the SPP that we have discussed currently, and the that actually flags the possibility of external interference or external presence in the Nepal politics or Nepal. And considering and when you think about whether India should be concerned or not, as rightly Dhananjay pointed out, the fears among the Indian scholars or Indian policymakers about having a superpower being sitting on the north of India, and that is why we were also worried when the Chinese that ship which came to Hambantota recently, and why we had actually flagged the issue of security concern. That remains almost similar if there is a security pact, or if we have a superpower, whether in this in the name of National Guard, or in the name of helping out Nepal through its managing or tackling the disaster that it's prone to. I would like to flag one issue, that we don't need superpower to come and help us out here. I belong to a state which is in the coast of Bay of Bengal, and we are prone to frequent cyclones, and Odisha has been awarded to have created a benchmark in managing the natural calamities over the last 20 years. Therefore, we know how to manage. Therefore, probably US presence may not be. I mean, Dr. Santosh Sharma will be probably the best person to find. Clarify whether it is required or not. But what I would like to now say that at one point Santosh Sharma actually pointed out rightly the hue and cry why it is because SPC has been shrouded in secrecy all through, and probably after the ratification of the MCC in February, US thought that it is the right time to probably push through the SPP, and but they probably failed to gauge the mood of the Nepali politicians, and probably thought that the democracy in Nepal is very young, therefore the politicians can be taken for granted. That is not the case. So and second point is that as commenting on or that Dhananjay actually made 2 points which I have noted down, is that when we come to Nepal and when you come to South Asia, and from a South Asian perspective, we have actually no South Asian vision per se, because as you know that SAARC is in completely limbo in like ICU, and we don't know when it is going to come out of that. So therefore the South Asian understanding, he also further he mentioned that South Asian understanding is probably the best way out of everything. And in fact, to have the South Asian understanding, we have to have 2 things to keep aside to have an understanding. One is to keep terror away from the South Asia, whether you are sponsoring terror or you are actually sheltering terror elements in any of the South Asian nation. Second is to keep our individual countries away from the external influence of the superpowers influence, because that has always been when you go through the history of the last 70 years, that how the superpowers have always played a game of dividing and actually siding it one country or the other, is there in the public domain or is there in the public to find out. And the what I would like to flag before the August speakers is that Brigadier Sir is also there, that the issues that is between India and Nepal is that we have the territorial dispute that came up during Prime Ministership of Mr. Oli, and that is, although has been swept under the carpet, but has not yet been resolved. So we need to actually go throughout resolve the issues. And second is that it has been probably more than 2 decades since I completed or I was part of the JNU. That issue of peace and friendship used to be flagged almost every second or third year as an outstanding issue. That remains. There is another issue which was added in 2016, was the demonetization irritant, because Nepalese, those who are legally allowed to keep 25,000 of Indian currency, were left high and dry when the demonetization happened. So they claim that more than 500 rupees currency is still with the Nepalese, that the government of India has to take a decision. And so why I am trying to flag these issues, that Nepalese, the people in they are quite sensitivities, and India is as a big country, although we share equal power in every forum, that we need to actually give respect to their sensitivities. And I am sure Nepal in future will not be swayed away by whether it's coming from north or whether it's coming from the farther place like the Pacific or Atlantic. So therefore, what I would like to say, that when we the understanding is better, we can probably be friends in all times to come, and we should never counter a situation where I see 81-4 kind of situation will happen, because that is the fear of Indian security establishment, that any kind of Sino Pakistan relationship, and if they share it with Nepal, probably Nepal, maybe, I mean, the possibility is there that no, ISI may try to create some a situation. So therefore I would just conclude here, and thank you so much, Dr. Binod and all the panelists.
In terms of that US President Roosevelt, that the buck stops here. When Nihar has given the speech, I can say the buck stops here. He had made very clear that India has responded as a first responder to any crisis and disaster in the neighborhood, whether it is Sri Lanka or Nepal. And we have gathered enough experience that we are in a position to transfer our knowledge to other countries. So in the pretext of this, if some great superpower wants to come to Nepal, I think that's not enough. There must be something else behind that. So before the buck stops here, we have lined up another discussant from Central University of Gujarat, who has been very patient, and I hope she's not angry. We haven't met yet, and this is our first interaction with Madam Mansi, Dr. Mansi. Her area of focus was, of course, Europe and America and India. But no country is in isolation. So what's happening in Ukraine and Russia, it has a great impact on the life of people in South Asia. So ma'am, Dr. Mansi, after this discussion, what we are missing, would you like to, with your sharp eyes and ears, would you like to correct us what we have missed? Have we lost a direction? Because most of the speakers today are very well known to me. So I was not able to counterattack them. Most of them are my seniors, and they have been working consistently on South Asia for the last 20 years. So I couldn't find any mistake with their speeches or with their facts and data. So Mansi, you can correct me because I'm a China kind of expert. The floor is yours, Dr. Mansi ma'am, from Central University of Gujarat. And she shares a background of military family. So she has the upper height of looking at the issue in security and all holistic terms. Madam, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Binod. And my task is fairly easy, towards the end of this discussion. I think we had a very illustrious panel, and most of the issues were comprehensively covered on today's topic. And if I speak for myself, I'm not really an expert on Nepal per se, but as you mentioned also in your introduction, I do, like my other colleagues here, keenly track developments in India's foreign policy and regional security in South Asia. So thank you, Dr. Binod, and my thanks to BRICS Institute and University of Mysore for inviting me to share my views. So what I'm going to do, like I said, that our panelists have actually covered the Nepalese and the Indian viewpoint on the situation, and also we got a perspective on South Asia. So I'm just going to summarize and give a general overview of today's topic and flag some key issues by contextualizing it in the larger geopolitical developments that we have seen. So yes, of course, we are at a critical juncture when we speak of the fallout of the Russia-Ukraine war and all kinds of troubles that we see coming from it, whether it's inflation, energy scarcity, currency devaluation. And this has, in fact, what I see has already slowed down, the global economy's natural recovery that we had, what we were making after the COVID-19 pandemic. And so when we look at from South Asian perspective, of course, it's a time of great economic uncertainty. And like Dr. Dhananjay had also pointed out in his talk when he was emphasizing on the relevance and the ever greater need to revive regionalism, because when we speak of South Asia, regional economies actually have nothing to fall back on. And we are seeing, South Asia is a troubled zone, whether it is about domestic political chaos, whether it is about our economic wars. And we have seen, the latest examples before us, whether it's Sri Lanka, Pakistan, how these, countries are reeling under the impact of the regional and the global economic issues. And we don't have regional buffers as such, against, to counter, to really cushion us against this global economic volatility. So in that sense, this is what we find ourselves in, and this is something which we all have to deal with. So what we also have seen post Ukraine war is this growing proximity, the what has been called as the Sino-Russian alliance, and that is certainly going to reorder South Asia's great power relations as well. I mean, again, we have those the traditional IR debates have been revived on sphere of influence, reliance on geoeconomics for security, prospects of neutrality. So I think states will have to navigate through the larger systemic and the strategic shifts that we are talking of, and that we will be seeing emanating from the Ukraine war. Sanctions have, of course, adversely impacted the trade, tourism. Smaller states are really feeling the brunt of it. The connectivity initiatives, the energy security, their military modernization projects. So especially when we speak of smaller states, and of course the topic today is on Nepal, they will have much bigger challenges to deal with. And when we speak of South Asia, again, like we are discussing, and the other panelists also pointed out, that every geopolitical move actually is studied through this prism of US-China rivalry. There is this always a complex push and pull interplay between US, China, and smaller nations. So when we speak of stability in South Asia, what are we actually referring to? We are not just referring to stability of their interrelationships, the bilateral relationships, but stability in South Asia also means stability in the domestic sphere of each of these countries as well. And then only we can get the whole picture, and we can speak of stability of the South Asian region per se. So yes, as one of the points was also made out, that whenever we have this intensified, geopolitical competition between two major powers, the great power rivalry, of course, as we study in IR theory, the hedging, how it is used to maximize gains, but at the same time, states also do not compromise their national interest to please big powers. And if we see South Asia, we have seen South Asia presenting a classic case, whether it's Nepal, Bangladesh, Maldives. They have made it clear on several occasions that they will not really surrender or give in to the diplomatic arm twisting by either China or US. So while they are very much aware of the power asymmetry also, but somewhere these states are also drawing a line to pursue their national interest without excessively undermining their respective strategic partnerships or special relationships that they enjoy with one of the major powers. So there is some sort of a fine balance that they are trying to create. And of course, when it comes to Nepal, China has emerged as a key player. We have all seen that. And of course, the Indian blockade that happened in 2015, post that, China, of course, when Nepal signed the BRI in 2017. So that was a major shift in that sense, the growing closeness between China and Nepal. And of course, Mr. Santosh pointed out that there is no other bilateral relationship that matches that of India-Nepal, and India-Nepal relations are very special and very unique with no parallel. But at the end of the day, we also need to really, focus on the battle of perceptions, which really need to change. And the political narrative in both the countries has changed. And if I can refer to the eminent persons group, which was appointed in 2016, so that report also needs to be sort of taken consideration into, and how we can speed up and work on a more active track to diplomacy initiative between the two countries. So that would be something which we really need to focus on. And the Ukraine crisis, of course, will keep bringing back this rhetoric on territorial nationalism. And but I think this is the more opportune time for both countries to display sensitivities to each other's concerns and explore what is feasible and what can be really worked on. And of course, India, I especially feel, speaking from an Indian point of view, when we have announced our neighborhood first policy, and we have really made some grand gestures, and we are trying to really give a special, treatment to our neighborhood. I mean, taking cognizance of the geostrategic relevance of our neighborhood, then we really also need to up our game when it comes to effective implementation of our neighborhood first policy. So that would be certainly, I think, be on cards as far as
Thank you,
India
ma'am.
is concerned.
Thank
So
you.
I would conclude here. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Dr. Mansi said that it's very hard to be a small nation in the current geopolitical, not only current, even in the past. So, but India has been a benign power in South Asia, and we have coexisted with smaller nations. It's an example for many nations to follow, especially for China and other countries. If you go to the Latin America and Europe, see the kind of existence. So I'm not sure my colleague from Nepal, who is in minority here, next time I'll engage more scholars from Nepal, will agree. We had lack of some time, so we couldn't invite much scholars from there. So as a moderator, I want to thank each and every distinguished speaker today for cooperating with me in the time. And next time we'll make it far better time. So I hand over to my colleagues in Mysore, University of Mysore, who are very patient they have a lot of questions to engage you. So Bharti Madam, can I hand over back to you, please?
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you.
Thank
so
you. Thank you so much, Dr. Binod. Today we have a wonderful discussion. It's a great pleasure to me to be a part of this panel discussion. And I may have very pleasure to say that today, like as Santosh, Professor Santosh and Tripathi and Santis sir, and along with Mansi, they gave different views on this issue. Anyway, as Tripathi said, this is the right time for India to take, a firm decision. And he also noted that no one will change and no one will break the Indo-Nepal relations because we have a roti-beti relations. It's enough to understand the strong bindings between India and Nepal. Yes, of course, no one will hurt and no one, yes, there will be small hurdles and small tensions in between, countries. It's quite natural. And apart from that, as Santis sir told, it's every country, every sovereign nation is able, and it will be having a sustainable relations with other countries. At the same time, they are also capable to maintain their their relations with other countries. It doesn't mean that we can interfere in their internal matter. Of course, we are not supposed to interfere in their internal matter. But as a big elderly brother, India, when it comes to the security of South Asian region, India has to take some, strong stand towards this issue. This is my opinion. And of course, I don't think so. I hope it will not create a new other tensions in this region, because already we experienced from China's interference in the South Asian region. With this hope, I'm really thankful to all the panelists, and it's a great moment for me to have such a people. Thank you, Dr. Binod.
And
over
ma'am,
to you.
any questions we have? Alok, can you come? Mr. Alok, Dr. Alok. If any students from university have any questions to our panel, please go ahead right now. We have 5 minutes for that. Otherwise, we'll close the session. Everybody is here for a long time.
Yeah,
Especially
it's, moreover, it's very happy to say that students are very enlightened by today's panel discussion. It's really wonderful session. I hope we will have many more discussions on India and Nepal relations, because there are so many issues between India and Nepal. How to maintain, how to balance. For India, it's a big challenge to balance the relations with neighboring countries. Though India is having a priority in its policy by saying that India's neighborhood first policy and neutrality and peaceful coexistence These are all the important things in India's foreign policy. India has to maintain all these principles very firmly. With this, really, once again, I'm thankful to all the panelists to enlighten our students today.
Brigadier sir, do you have anything to add in the last? We are going to close. Sir, unmute, please. Unmute yourself.
Thank you so much, everyone. It was really heartening to learn more and more about our close relations. And I'm totally with what is it. I think we should shed the elderly brotherly relations with all our neighbors. It's time we treat them equal. And as I said, a team wins when all members participate and on equal terms, and that will be more appropriate in this time. And in fact, I had a question in between, but it's about Nepal only. Was it an appeasement policy to China or to support India? I leave it as a question, which can be answered in subsequent discussions.
I can request Mr. Santos. He's saying that the deal SPC cancelled was something to please China or India or something different, please. The last question, Santosh, today. Mr. Santosh.
Okay, great. Okay, great. I think just before answering that, I'd like to say, I think somebody mentioned it's not easy time to be a small power, but also I don't think it's easy to being a big power as well, because with that, I think if I can put Spider-Man here, I think with big power comes bigger responsibilities. And like, I think it was mentioned, the box stops with the bigger power must be looked to. So it's not easy taking a GSP, we woke up to that a bit late, but then again, I think that had an impact. Domestic political scene also brought out, especially in the context that where we already had a toxic debate on the MCC. It came immediately after that, and like I think US was simply trying to push this through during that time, even though the agreement was signed 4 years back. Right? And also, there's no doubt there was some influence of China in that decision. Partly, I think to a certain extent, it was about appeasing China in the sense that China had been angry after we ratified the MCC. In that context, I think taking away the SPP was partly rectifying that anger, and then to put some. But then again, I think all these factors had a role in singing the SPP agreement.
Thank you, Mr. Santos, for this clarification. And I think in future, we'll follow this topic very closely. But today, the time doesn't allow me to carry on forward. So I invite one of my students, Mr. Alok Kumar, who is a student of IR and very close to Nepal, to, on behalf of BRICS Institute and also University of Mysore, to extend a very heartful and candid thanks to all of our senior colleagues and speakers. Alok, please help me. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Alok Kumar Pathak, and I am second year student of IR department, Maharaja College, University of Mysore. A warm and delightful evening to all. It's an honor to give the vote of thanks on behalf of Department of International Relations, University of Mysore and BRICS Institute, India. For distinguished speeches by our respective speakers of the day, Santosh Sharma Paudel sir, Department of International Relations, Tribhuvan University, Nepal. Dr. Santis Singh sir, Department of Political Science, Central University of Haryana, and Dr. Dhananjay Tripathi sir, Department of International Relations, South Asian University, New Delhi. Foremost, our utmost thanks go to our Vice Chancellor, Professor G. Hemant Kumar sir. Without his support, it would not have possible. And of course, the team behind this is Professor Bharti Hiremat ma'am, Head of the Department, International Relations, Maharaja College, University of Mysore. And Dr. Binod Singh sir, Director of BRICS Institute, India. We have received a treasure of knowledge given by all the eminent speakers, that too on the concurrent area of international relations, which for sure help each one of us to understand the relation between India and Nepal, on a special focus on US activism in South Asia. Thank you so much, Podal sir, Dr. Singh sir, and Dr. Tripathi sir for enlightening us with such an insightful lecture. We look forward to hear you such discussion in future on various other important topics of the global world. I thank Dr. Mansi Singh ma'am, Center for Security Studies, Central University of Gujarat, and Dr. Nihar Ranjan Das, South Asian expert, for the invaluable discussions which further specified the relevance of the topic and understanding the in-depth relation shared by both the countries. Thank you so much, Dr. Mansi Singh ma'am and Dr. Das sir, for your instructive part of the panel discussion. I thank Professor Anita Bimla Brax ma'am, Principal of Maharaja College, University of Mysore, for her cooperation. I would further extend a hearty thanks to Brigadier Rajkumar sir for his presence. So thank you all. Thank you, students, teachers, and others who have joined online. Thank you, everyone, for this online panel discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. It was a
On
pleasure to
another
have you all.
topic, thank you.
We'll meet soon. Thank you, Mr. Santosh from Nepal. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Vinodji. Thank you.
Sandesh sir. Thank you so much for.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Hearty welcome to you, Mysore. Please do visit to Mysore, sir. It's my formal invitation to you. And
Sure, sir. Sure. Sure, ma'am. Definitely will come. Last year I was there, ma'am. Next, definitely I'll meet you.
oh, okay. Thank you, sir. At the end, sir, anyway, it's very interesting. There is a question in my mind, whether this issue leads and a dramatic change, political change in this region. In the next discussion, we will continue with this, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mansi. Thank you, Nihal sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
You all.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Dr. Vinod. See you from Lagos next time.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Happy journey, sir. Happy journey.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Dr. Mansi. Thank you, Dr. Vinod.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Madam, thank you so much for, I think it took so much time today, but
No.
we had a lot of speakers today, 4 to 5,
Yes, sir. It's really wonderful.